Hey guys, I'm David and I'm Australian Vietnamese.
Hey guys, I'm Jeremy. I'm Australian Mauritian.
Hi, I'm Poti and I'm Australian Greek.
Hi, I'm Viv, I'm Australian Indian, and today we're going to be talking about how the FFA are trying to de-ethnicise football in Australia.
With the FFA moving along the path to de-ethnicise elite-level Australian football, we ask ourselves how acceptable this is in such a multicultural nation. Through implementing various policies, such as the National Club Identity Policy, the Federation continues to limit the sort of cultural background and influences that have made Australia what it is today, especially in the world of sport. Considering various factors, including economic, political, and of course socio-cultural, we intend to convey why these sorts of policies are only limiting the development in Australian sport, not only on the elite level, but also through the semi-professional divisions as well. The FFA aims are clearly underlined in their 2014 policy, where they state, the National Club Identity Policy aims to promote and strengthen the reputation of football in Australia by making the sport, football, inclusive for all participants. They also state that the FFA acknowledges the multicultural nature of Australia and the valuable contribution that various communities have made to the historical development of football in Australia. The FFA also respects clubs' desires to acknowledge their heritage and contribution to their local communities, with the FFA still maintaining the responsibility to protect and grow the reputation of the sport of football in Australia and ensure that its openness and accessibility to all Australians.
So how does a country that's so multicultural accept such a policy? The simple answer is they haven't. The introduction of the policy has been met with great criticism across Australia, particularly for social reasons. Here are a couple of responses from the fans. FFA want to be inclusive by banning anything with ethnic connotations. That's not inclusivity, that's xenophobia. Andy Cusson tweeted. Another fan. Unbelievable stuff by the FFA. Ethnic clubs in this country represent so much more than just a football team, Lucas Pavlidis wrote. During the 50s and 60s, a larger number of European immigrants landed in Australia, bringing with them the love for the sport. Football has always been labelled as a foreign sport ever since its establishment in Australia. With the heavy foreign involvement, it has brought both good and the bad from the sport. On one hand, it has brought colour and atmosphere to the game, as well as new tactics, styles and standards. But on another side came the violence fueled by ethnic rivalries. Philip Mosley of the Australian Sports Commission argues, however, that the good severely outweighs the bad. The policy, therefore, seems only like a half-assed approach to try and deal with such problems like violence at the grounds, but the policy doesn't exactly clarify how to improve things. 1.2 of the National Identity Policy speaks of acknowledging the multicultural nature of Australia. With the removal of these ethnic symbols, logos and names, it seems evident that they are actually limiting ethnic influence within the sport. They are not protecting or supporting these communities, they are diminishing them. The policy developed to de-ethnicize football within Australia has both cut across the principles of multiculturalism and has threatened the functionality of the ethnic communities themselves. Clubs have served as the centre point for entire communities due to the multitude of functions they possess, and to demand that clubs deny their ethnic identities is to cut the root of their survival. Australia should be looking to embrace its multicultural tag, and this should extend to its sporting clubs, as football within Australia would be nowhere near where it is today without its ethnic influence. Certain communities feel as though they are being targeted. Being affiliated with a Croatian club myself, they certainly feel as though the FFA are targeting Croatian-based clubs by citing examples of other teams being allowed to use emblems that include the Jewish Star of David, like Maccabi Hakoah in Sydney City. Marko Vrkic, the president of local Canberra club Canberra FC, formerly known as Croatia Deacon, says this targeting is a result of poor fans' behaviour at certain events. Looking at Western Sydney Wanderers, it would be foolish to suggest that they would have had the same success if they did not target local ethnic communities. This policy would rid the Western Sydney Wanderers of atmosphere and passion at their games and would ultimately hinder the club's success. Economical issues will also be touched on a little later by Vivek. One of the benefits presented by this policy's introduction is the limiting of the use of foreign country names for clubs. Within Canberra, clubs that used to be named Croatia Deacon, which has now changed to Canberra FC, will feature a more inclusive and less intimidating environment for those who don't share the same ethnicity. It has been presented as a more welcoming club whilst maintaining its strong culture that has separated it from the rest.
Although de-ethnicizing movements focus to civilise and reiterate more multiculturalism between clubs, the economic factors affecting this may in turn prove negative. The removal of sole ethnic entities representing a club may encourage a broader range of sponsors and shareholders, but it's eliminating the original sponsors and shareholders who helped build the clubs up. In recent times, the Melbourne Knights Football Club refused to bring on board a large Croatian-based sponsor to their club due to new guidelines set out by the NSL and FFA. As the request of the sponsor was the club would then be referred to as the Melbourne Croatia Soccer Club, due to the amount they put forward as invested. Although the sponsorship may have been a valuable asset for the club were not able to accept the logo or name change due to the intentions to de-ethnicize their football club. A quote from the journalist Jen Spade stated, "At the time, many took a wait-and-see approach to the policy, which restricts clubs from using language other than English when implementing symbols that they hold ethnic, national, political, racial, or religious to either initiate a combination for the sponsors." So what if a club was to be sponsored by a small business with the owner's last name being a little too ethnic? Would you have to de-ethnicize the sponsor then? A prime example in Australia's top tier league, the A-League, is giant club Western Sydney Wanderers, who when they first entered the A-League brought a huge ethnic following in regards to the club's fan base. This in turn ensured almost every home game the stadium was at capacity, creating an atmosphere unlike any other club in the A-League. This appeal was very similar to what the Canterbury Bulldogs had for the National Rugby League, who themselves have a vast ethnic society. In turn, doing the same, you're ensuring larger crowd numbers and more merchandise being sold. This created a sense of belonging, which many of these multicultural teams have with the diversity that they have with different ethnic groups. Should Australia choose to de-ethnicize these teams, it could potentially lead to a feeling of these established paying fans to not believe that they are appreciated by both the club and the sport, and in turn choose to take their passion elsewhere. With football slowly on the rise in Australia, clubs losing paying members at the gate could drastically halt any essential plans that they have for a better financial future.
The concept of de-ethnicising elite level Australian football by the Football Federation Australia clashes with a number of political factors. These include the Human Rights Act and the Discrimination Act. With Australia being renowned for being such a multicultural country and accepting of cultures far and wide, the plan to de-ethnicize the sport goes against everything our nation stands for. The first political factor this issue affects is discrimination. Discrimination can be defined as the treatment or consideration of or making a distinction in favour of or and against an individual based on the group, class or category to which the individual is perceived to belong to rather than on individual merit. There are many areas of discrimination, and in this case this issue falls under the Racial Discrimination Act, where discrimination on the basis of race, colour, descent or nation or ethnic origin. Predominantly what the FFA has attempted to do is regulate the ethnic culture on which football in Australia was built on. Football in Australia has been around for over 130 years, but it wasn't really until post-World War I and World War II era, when migrants from Europe fled their war-torn countries to seek refuge in Australia, that football started to gain recognition. The European migrants that came to Australia carried with them their love and passion for the game, and a century later the game has been criticised as too ethnic, and the FFA are trying to eradicate the ethnic culture from the game. With the FFA's new policy to de-ethnicize football, it seems like everything Australia is known for is contradicting itself. In a way, this is seen as very un-Australian. The next factor that affected is the individual's human rights. Human rights are basically whatever your nationality, place of residence, sex, national or ethnic origin, skin colour, religion and language. We're all equally entitled to our human rights without the needs of discrimination. With this being said, does it sound morally and politically correct that Football Federation Australia is trying to regulate the ethnicity within our country that is held. The question now asked is how exactly does limiting the cultural symbols and the names help the FFA achieve national identity that is clearly stated in their policy? My belief is that the national identity can be only achieved by freedom to embrace the ethnic cultures that call Australia home. Without being able to do so, we have no national identity and we aren't multicultural, not one bit. Regulating the symbols a club can display will not in any way de-ethnicise sport, because the people who support the club will always be a supporter and little change will come from the policy being put into action. It is just merely a cosmetic change. The heart of the club, if ethnic, will always be ethnic. The policy implemented by the FFA does not explain how it lines up with the way of de-ethnicising football without any clear rationale. It seems as if the guidelines enforced by the FFA's way of stamping out violent or disruptive behaviour at matches that can be deemed as ethnic view of violence. But even so, de-ethnicising football will not have an effect on limiting behaviour of games one bit.
Whilst examining the various factors affected by the FFA's choice to de-ethnicise Australian football, it was clear that the policies and practices implemented had some negative intent. Key factors have been affected, ranging from the community level to the elite level of the Australian football. Politically, laws and acts are on the verge of being violated, as well as general human rights. The policies have defied the growth economically throughout all levels of Australian football, as well as other sporting codes. The removal of foundation sponsors and original ethnic entities that have built these organisations up can potentially leave them in a weak position, both financially and in regards to their fan base and cultural support. Although some evidence may be provided to make small changes to de-ethnicize parts around the game, policies and changes made to this extent just seem wrong in a nation that normally boasts about its multiculturalism.